And people trickling in from Michigan, Florida, New Orleans, Louisiana, awesome. Seattle, loving to see this. Wisconsin, okay. Thank you for being here. Awesome, awesome. Awesome, beautiful, wonderful. Thank you all for coming. Um, we're going to go ahead and get started, but if you're joining, please continue to drop your name in the chat and where you're from and where on your midwifery student journey you are. Um, Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's panel discussion, Calling All Student Midwives Careers in Birth Centers. My name is Gianna Fay. I am the Director of Midwifery Innovation at Birth Center Equity, BCE, and I will be the moderator for our discussion today. BCE is the proud founder and sponsor of Birth Center Week, now in its third year. So that is exciting. Birth Center Equity works to ensure that every community has access to safe, loving midwifery care by investing in birth centers led by Black, Indigenous, people of color leaders. BCE is a national catalyst, growing community birth infrastructure, resources, power, and innovation. Grounded in a network of nearly 60 birth centers spanning 26 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico, all led by Black, Indigenous, and people of color. We're so excited to have you here for the conversation that is vital, not just to the future of midwifery, but to the health and well-being of birthing people and their families now. Before we get started, I'd like to truly welcome everyone in our audience who has joined us today, particularly all you student midwives here. We are so proud of you and see you on this journey. As many of you know, midwifery care improves birth outcomes, enhances the care experience, is cost-effective, and reduces inequities. This is even more true in community birth settings like birth centers. After all, birth centers are the only clinical facilities that are structured around the midwifery model of care. While hospital systems are often based in medicalized and hierarchical approaches, birth centers prioritize safety, autonomy, informed choice, physiologic birth, and dignified relationship-based care. Because of this, it's absolutely imperative that we encourage more midwifery students across all licensure paths, CPMs, CNMs, and CMs, to consider careers in the birth center setting. Today, we are joined by an incredible panel of midwife students, midwives, and midwife educators who bring a wide range of experience and insight into how we train, support, and guide the next generation into community-based midwifery. So I'm going to go through and read each person's bio to familiarize yourself with them. First, I'm going to start with Darian. Darian Thomas, pronoun she, her, is a CPM student who attends Midwives College of Utah. She is training in her hometown of Detroit at Birth Detroit. She also has 2 home birth midwifery preceptors in 2 separate practices, Birth Beautiful and Radical Midwifery. Thank you for being here, Darian. Next, I'm going to introduce Sara Ceiba Flores, pronouns they, them. Sara is a queer, trans, two-spirit midwife who centers body sovereignty and sacred erotic power in their midwifery practice. With 30 years of experience attending births, they continue to find deep awe in the unfolding stories of human cycles, life, death, rebirth, and reclamation. Their work spans home births, birth centers, and hospital settings, reflecting a broad and grounded approach rooted in their indigenous Mayan lineage. Sara Ceiba resides in unceded Lisuan Olón, you're going to say that correctly after this, territory in the Bay Area of California. Sara, thank you for being here. Ruth Zielinski, pronoun she, her, is a clinical professor and midwifery graduate program lead at the University of Michigan School of Nursing. Ruth's midwifery experience includes work in Southwest Michigan and then with the University of Michigan Midwives. Her current clinical practice includes precepting students in global settings such as Uganda, where she is today, y'all. I just have to say that. And the United Arab Emirates. Ruth, thank you for being here. And lastly, certainly not least, I'm going to introduce Talita Oseguera, pronouns she, her. Talita is a certified nurse midwife and reproductive justice advocate who works at Choices Birth Center in Memphis, Tennessee. She is committed to improving reproductive justice, honoring and amplifying the voices, experiences, and issues of Black women and individuals across the sexual, reproductive, and perinatal continuum. Talita, thank you for being here. All right, let's dive in. First, Darian, I want to start with you. You're currently a CPM student and have had the unique experience of training both in a birth center setting, mostly with certified nurse midwives, and in a home birth setting with CPMs. Tell us more about that.
Well, yeah. Well, first, thank you all for this opportunity, Birth Center Equity. But for me, overall, the experience has truly been a blessing of one of a kind. I'm being able, I have the opportunity to train in my hometown, with midwives that look like me as far as being Black and primarily from the same area as me. So I feel like I'm living in my dream, a dream come true, and these experiences and opportunities will forever be grateful to me.
Yeah, yes. That's why I wanted to highlight that you are in your hometown. Can you share how that experience for you might be different than perhaps some of your other student colleagues, if their clinical experiences have been as, I don't want to say easeful, because I know you're working hard, but to relocate or experience difficulty finding preceptors?
Yeah, well, for me, I must say that I'm in a setting where there are multiple midwives in a collaborative space where, clinical ideas, decisions, and tasks are shared, where that can feel like a family where I'm comfortable with asking questions that I may have learned in class and getting a variety of feedback, I would say. I feel like I'm exposed to, different practice styles and skills in one setting that ultimately shapes the way, I'm going to practice and sharpen my skill set. So I mean,
Awesome. Thank you. And for those that don't know, Darian's beautiful background there is an actual picture from inside of Birth Detroit. So she's happy to sport that there. Is there anything else that you want to share about lessons you're learning from your clinical experience in both settings and how to straddle those two worlds, I guess?
well, yeah. Well, I must say, midwives are midwives and birth is birth. But the different settings and different practice styles, they equip me with, options, learning management skills over here at home birth, where sometimes that setting can be low resource. And then the birth center, where sometimes that practice can look like advanced technologies and advanced practices. I would say just, equips me to be able to provide more options to my clients to give them that, informed care and where we can come up, with the best shared decisions together. I just feel like options is, very important. And as a provider who is well-rounded, that is beneficial to your clients, to your community, and midwifery practice in general. So, but
Yeah.
overall, I'm still soaking in all of the lessons, all of the skills. Yeah, I'm in my, phase 2 of my journey. So I'm still soaking in all of the skills and lessons. And I'm looking forward to starting phase 3, where I'm actually going to be putting those skills into practice and management. But I will say before I end that for, all the aspiring and future midwives, I definitely want to encourage you all with the growth and expansion of birth centers to try to get involved, whether it's, this way or that way, one way, shape, or form, because whether you end up at working at the birth center, you're still building your reputation as a provider in your community. And that can look like attending a training event or just an event in general. And that's actually how I started with Birth Detroit. Before I even applied for midwifery school, I showed up to an event, not knowing anybody, with my head held high and confidence just there, introducing myself to everyone. They probably was like, "Who is this?" But I had to, do what I had to do. And that's where I'm here now. And I'm very, very grateful for all the opportunities and for all that is to come. So I'm shedding light and love to all the future midwives out there.
Thank you. I can attest to that. I was there. Darian is, everyone was like, who is this? And we're so grateful to have her in our community. And I want to shout out A. Marie Collins, who is one of your home birth preceptors. We shouted out Radical Midwifery earlier, but she's here to support you because we all are behind you and all of the students on the call. So thank you for sharing your experience so far. We love you and appreciate you, Darian. Next, I'm going to bring Sara into the conversation. As a trans and queer multi-gendered midwife, can you speak to how your identity shaped your experience in your training?
Thank you so much for the question, Gianna, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with all y'all. Welcome everybody who's here in the Zoom world. It's really an honor to be on this panel with these wonderful midwives and midwives to be. Thank you, Birth Center Equity, for this privilege and opportunity and for creating this forum that prior to your work never existed. So I'm deeply grateful and I'm so happy to be here. And in terms of sharing about my training and my background, I want to start by telling you just a little bit about who I am, because I think who we are as individual midwives really shapes how we show up for our communities. In my indigenous tradition, I identify as Two-Spirit, and Two-Spirit people are recognized in our traditions as healers, midwives, herbalists, root doctors. For those folks in the Zoom space who might be unfamiliar with the term Two-Spirit, it's a modern term that really was created by people of indigenous ancestry in North America to describe somebody who carries sacred masculine and feminine energies and does not ascribe to traditional Western binary identities of gender. So, as a Two-Spirit person, I naturally found myself in a healing role in my family from a young age. I was always the one to go change my grandmother's bandages or help somebody who was throwing up in the bathroom and everybody else in the family is gagging and it doesn't bother me at all to hold their hair back. Or if it does bother me, I know how to, swell some Vicks on the other side of the door so I'm not inhaling that scent. Um, and when I discovered midwifery at the age of 17, I thought, ooh, yes, this is what I want to do. This is for me. I connected deeply, immediately with the essence of who a midwife is and what a midwife does. And at the same time, I was an out queer young person. And I quickly realized that the broader world of midwifery had been deeply shaped by colonization and white supremacy and homophobia. And it often failed and still fails to recognize and uplift Two-Spirit medicine as something that rightfully belongs in birth work.
Mm-hmm.
But rather than deter me personally with who I am, this only strengthened my resolve to move me towards midwifery with a clear sense of purpose to help reclaim the rightful place of Two-Spirit, queer, and trans and gender nonconforming people within the world of birth work and reproductive care. So during these 3 decades of attending births, which I promise you has passed in the blink of an eye, when I was preparing to offer my reflections, I had to do the math multiple times. I really couldn't believe I meant 3 decades. And secretly, I really often want to get a little Vernex off of the babies and like start rubbing it around my eyes because I think I'm aging rapidly in midwifery and I'm grateful to be aging, but I think, oh gosh, I got to get some of that youthful spirit back. So Darian, you're really motivating me with your enthusiasm. Thank you for reminding me about that youthful spirit. But truthfully, I have been in this work for 3 decades. And during this time, I have had the privilege of attending births in home birth settings, birth center settings, and hospital settings. And I very intentionally did my nurse midwifery integration experience at a birth center. I knew right away that the impression that birth was going to leave on my heart was going to be very important to how I would practice for the rest of my midwifery career. And so I went to a birth center. I was not able to stay in my home community, which is also Detroit. Um, at the time, I didn't live in Detroit, but I am from Detroit. I had to go to Alaska from Arizona to go to a birth center. And I went with the intention of opening my heart and spirit to what it would be like to be in a place where the sacredness of birth was uplifted. I can't say that's exactly what happened there, but what I will say is that I learned that the calmness of my spirit as a midwife impacted how birthing people could also trust themselves.
Yeah.
And because of that, I had the courage to graduate nurse midwifery school and start my own home birth practice right away. So I really want to be clear and say I would encourage every student midwife who may one day practice in a hospital setting to seriously consider seeking your initial training outside of the hospital as a foundation for learning who you are as a midwife.
Yeah.
Because honestly, that training has left an imprint on my heart 30 years later that has carried through to all the different practice settings I've been in, which have been a home birth practice. I worked in and led a birth center called Bay Area Midwifery, or BAM, in Lishan Ohlone Territory, Oakland, California. Um, and I also worked in a Santa Rosa birth center that is now closed, and I still attend home births. Additionally, I practice in a hospital setting. And I'll be honest that I really only transitioned out of hospital birth settings when I became a parent and was seeking a more consistent schedule for parenthood. But my heart and my spirit feel at home in birth centers. And I want to speak a little bit about what that means for me as a trans and queer midwife, because honestly, I love birth. I really do. But for me, midwifery has never been solely about attending births. It's always been about being present with the human in front of me, someone moving through a moment of transformation, whatever that might be. And what draws me to midwifery as a queer and trans midwife is a deep commitment to empowerment and bodily sovereignty, which is something that we queer and trans people are experts in. We have to define our own path within our bodies to even exist, to even survive. And our bodies are under threat constantly. So, whether the person in front of me is a birthing person or someone entering menopause, a person getting their first cervical cancer screening, or someone seeking an abortion, a trans person beginning gender affirming hormone care like testosterone or estrogen, I need to show up in my authenticity in order to fully show up for them.
Mm.
And midwifery in various practice settings has not always been welcoming to me in my full self. And I think students who are in this Zoom room who are trans, queer, gender nonconforming, two-spirit, intersex, you know what I'm talking about. It can be really hard to bring our full authentic selves to spaces that are dominated by a cisgender heteronormative culture. And honestly, even though I've been queer and out as a midwife my whole midwifery practice, and this is controversial, but I found the freedom to come out as trans in a hospital setting because the systems in place in that hospital setting are intolerant of transphobia, at least on a policy level.
Mm.
So to close, I want to just share that I really urge folks in out of hospital birth settings where my heart lives to really move beyond an idea of allyship with GNC, gender nonconforming, trans, queer folks, and move into accomplishment, because I want to be back in a birth center. I want to be back in home birth. And I think a lot of people here in this space also are drawn to being with our community as queer and trans midwives. And more people who are queer and trans and gender nonconforming choose out of hospital birth because we feel safer in those spaces. So we need more of us as providers in those spaces. And so for me, looking at what allyship is, it often looks like, inclusive language. People might intentionally say birthing person instead of woman, or well person visit instead of well woman visit. And these gestures are very important, but they honestly do not invoke meaningful risk or systematic change. So as an accomplice, I really am imploring really the community that wants to have more gender nonconforming, trans, queer clients to uplift the privilege that we have when we have birth centers, when we are midwives, to really invest in uplifting trans and queer and GNC leadership, like the way birth center equity does. I want to really ask the question, is there a queer trans midwife working in the birth center that we're talking about inviting a queer and trans student into? And if so, can we let the community know that there's a queer trans GNC midwife practicing there? Is there safety for that queer trans GNC midwife to be out in that setting? And I'll just close by saying that when we do that, when we move from allyship to accomplishship, then we're really saying to aspiring midwives that are trans, that are queer, that are two-spirit GNC, that we see your medicine. I see your medicine. We see your gift. We want you here. You belong here. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Sara. That was so powerful and dynamic. So many things stood out that I want to just wrap around in a bow not prettier than the one that you already brought it to us in. One, that conversation around allyship versus accompliship. I have not heard that frame and I appreciate it, and especially some actionable steps and ideas of how we can do that. I think that is really, that's something I'm taking away from that's completely new to me. So thank you for bringing that. And then something that we agreed on when we did this planning session, that imprint, especially as a mostly hospital trained midwife, whichever route you're on, that imprint of physiological birth, sacredness of birth, however you want to call it in the community setting, is what has also lived with me through my career in the hospital setting, in a birth center setting, and so I also want to stress that to all the student midwives on this call is to get to know who you are as a midwife first, caring for this sacred time, and that will carry with you across all settings. Um, and then lastly, so many things, but the last thing I wanted to bring out and thank you for was the language of two-spirit medicine. I am going to use that, look into that all the time, because that is what I feel just on a personal note when I am in relation with speaking with GNC folks and genderqueer folks, So I appreciate, thank you for introducing me to the mystery of that two-spirit medicine. I have so many things to go learn, so thank you so much. Okay, and then let's move to Talita. Talita, you work at Choices Birth Center in Memphis, which has a fellowship program specifically designed for CNM graduates who are interested in community-based practice. Can you tell us about the fellowship program, how it came about, what it's structured like, and how it helps fill in those gaps for CNMs trained in the traditional hospital-based setting?
Yes, absolutely. Hello, everybody. So my name is Talita Oseguera. Thank you for this question and for asking about the fellowship. I do want to start by just introducing Choices as a birth center. I don't know how many people on the call are familiar with it, but Choices is a full spectrum sexual and reproductive healthcare clinic out of Memphis, Tennessee, and it is the only freestanding birth center in Memphis, entire history. It actually started in response to, it's been around since 1974, actually, as a abortion clinic in response to when Roe passed the first time, and has grown into what community has needed in terms of wellness services, gender affirming therapy and care, family planning, contraception, abortion, and then expanded into midwifery care in 2017. At that time, Choices was offering home birth services through our director, Dr. Nakia Grayson, and her vision was, she's so brilliant. Her vision was to restore and reclaim Black midwifery in the South as a response to systemic racism, health disparities and inequities, and then just a lack of community-based cultural responsive care that specifically Black and Brown people need. So the birth center opened, we had our first baby in February 2021, and the fellowship is an opportunity for people who are newly graduated from a nurse midwifery school to practice in a space that is welcoming and safe and where people feel like they can expand on their training. Very competent people, of course. And I don't know if people on the call who are students have heard this, where the school may promise like full spectrum midwifery training. And they also promise that you're going to be competent or like safe enough. And like safe enough isn't like the goal. And so this space and this fellowship has offered people the opportunity to continue to grow and learn and perfect, well, maybe not perfect because you can't be perfect, but to expand on their craft and their skill and to really, I think, use the senses that we typically turn off in certified nurse midwifery school because we're in these institutional type training spaces with very little opportunity to learn and grow as midwives in community setting. I went to a program that said it was a full spectrum midwifery program, and I never was in a home birth setting or a birth center setting at all in my training in those 3 years that I was on campus. And I had to really coordinate a lot of different types of trainings that I wanted, like papaya workshops. I want to be an abortion provider, and that was not an option really. So this fellowship offers that specific kind of training. It's for a year, so it's over 12 months, and people practice in the clinic setting. We actually no longer have hospital privileges in Memphis. And so it is clinic and it's birth center specifically. And just based on staffing, it's also not home birth right this moment. But our fellows have been able to practice in all the spaces where people can seek sexual and reproductive health care, including birth. So
Wow.
that's sort of it in a very like little nutshell. The fellowship is founded on several pillars that really celebrate full scope sexual and reproductive health, which I mentioned a few of, also particularly into Black feminist thought and reproductive justice, and then the services that people need during pregnancy, but also beyond. We care for the whole family, which is just midwifery care, and then practicing in community space, patient-centered care, and then just an opportunity also to collaborate with community and this big medical industrial complex and feeling more comfortable in terms of like how to navigate that, because there are transfers that happen. We're in the South and a lot of it is very behind. I moved here from Oakland, California. I was born in Los Angeles, so my whole life has been West Coast and progressive in California, and also there's some ways that it's not progressive. So not saying that. And midwifery is not very widely accepted in the space that I'm practicing. There's one hospital here that employs midwives, and that's it. And that hospital doesn't actually even allow us to have privileges there at the moment. So there's a lot of like turf war and battles. And so I think this type of program and fellowship offers a space to navigate those kind of relationships as well.
Wow, thank you so much. I appreciate you providing that background on choices because I incorrectly introduce it when I say Choices Birth Center. Because, yes, you're right. The long history of reproductive care, including abortion care services, and all full spectrum reproductive health care is what Choices is about. And I think it also highlights how birth centers as facilities can serve their community's needs, what those needs are, and grow with them or change with them as needed. And hence the birth center opened many, many years later, right? In 2021, when the community was saying, this is a need we want. Or also family building, right? A Choices, you guys also do family building, is that right? Yeah, through IUI and other types of services. So I just love that Choices is a reflection of all that a just birth center can be, right? It's not only a place to give birth. So thank you for highlighting that. And for those of y'all that follow or see Dr. Nikia Grayson at all, she just did a really great podcast episode on evidence-based birth that spoke to that history as well. Really, really great. So thank you, Talita. We're so glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you. I loved that you mentioned about the breadth of midwifery care. One of the things that brought me to Choices is that this was the only place in the whole entire United States where all the things are happening in the same building. And you people probably know that abortion is illegal in Tennessee. And so in Memphis, we're not providing abortion anymore. But one thing that Dr. Grayson has said is like, it's the same person at just a different part of, their sexual reproductive health care journey. And we have several patients that have utilized services at whatever point they needed to, have given birth, and have also had an abortion at our Carbondale clinic and have had an abortion previously and now are getting an IUD and now are wanting to plan their next baby. And so it's really beautiful.
Yes, thank you for stating that
Yeah, thanks
clearly.
for having me.
Legal purposes and all that, yes, that you guys
Yes.
have the Carbondale clip. Yeah, just listen to the evidence-based birth episode that recently came out. I think she beautifully laid that all out too. So thank you. Thank you
Yes,
for
very beautiful.
the
Yeah.
fellowship program being a beacon for others to perhaps follow suit as well. Okay, now let's turn to the integration of community birth into nurse midwifery education, both in didactic and clinical settings. So, Ruth, Dr. Zielinski, many CNMs go through traditional hospital-based programs and aren't exposed to the birth center model or home birth until much later, as we've pointed out. Why is it important to integrate community birth into all aspects of CNM curriculum?
Greetings from Uganda. Happy Birth Center Week. I apologize if my internet goes out. I'm going to try to keep my camera on. Here in Uganda, there's actually a very lovely midwifery-led birth center about 45 minutes from here in Atiak. But I'm actually here for a 3-day workshop / conference working with midwives and other providers providing sexual and reproductive health care. So I'm really happy to be here, but also really happy to be able to still participate in this. Why I think it's important is it is in our midwifery philosophy to normalize birth, and birth happens differently in community settings. So I think for that reason, it is really important to essentially remember our roots and remember that the philosophy of care we give everywhere should be rooted in normalizing birth, with that happening best really in community settings, but we can bring some of that, as Sara said, into hospital practices.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit what steps the University of Michigan's midwifery program has taken to offer community birth experiences or exposure to their students?
Sure. So I've been faculty at University of Michigan for about 12 years. Before that, I did my PhD there. I did my midwifery training at U of M. And so I'm going to fully disclose that we are not in a place to provide community birth experiences for all students. sincerely wish that we could, and we're always looking for opportunities for community birth experiences for students who wish that experience, which a lot of our students do wish that experience in their essays that they write for their application to be admitted. They have, dreams of opening birth centers that just give me hope and optimism for the future that, things will change. But right now, we don't have as many community birth sites as we would love to have. We were able to place students at the ABC Alternative Birth Center, and then they removed the midwives from that practice. Some of our students do attend births at the Carmanos Birth Center, but I acknowledge that neither of those settings are freestanding or community birth centers. Some of our students do travel to the Netherlands. We have the opportunity to have 2 to 3 students every year travel to the Netherlands to learn from home birth midwives. And that's a really exciting experience for them. We do also have an agreement with a home birth practice in Des Moines that's certified nurse midwives. Some of you might know that Iowa actually has full scope practice for advanced practice nurses, including nurse midwives, and it makes it much easier for them to provide home birth and birth center care. And our students can do part of their integration semester with them if they're able to travel. We also have colleagues at New Eden Birth Center in Indiana, and our students can spend a day or 2 there. They don't necessarily have the opportunity to spend an extended amount of time. So, that said, because, University of Michigan is a nurse midwifery program, and currently 98% of certified nurse midwives provide care in the hospital setting, students need to spend a significant amount of time in the hospital to achieve competency. So it does take a large commitment on the part of the students, both time-wise and financially, to be able to participate in community birth experiences. And we apologize that, I wish I could be more optimistic than I would like to be, but I truly believe in full disclosure. I'm so excited about birth centers and home birth practices that are starting fellowships and residencies. And we do have 2 of our recent graduates that are both accepted into these opportunities and starting out in those settings, because they're not prepared in the program to jump right in. And I just so appreciate the need for these fellowships and residencies for that. So that said, we have integrated, and we've long since did this, but we've really been working more to do even more of it, integrating, community birth principles throughout the program, not as like an alternative to hospital birth, but really to normalize birth regardless of birth settings. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And I don't want to, I don't want to say it's not optimistic. It's honest, and it's where we're at right now. I think even in our planning, we talked about this question, and I think we wanted to keep it because you mentioned how in the meetings that you're having with other midwifery school leaders in CNM programs, are having this conversation of how can we integrate community birth learning into all aspects of education if we can't do clinical sites, or what can we do. So it's encouraging that it's a conversation that's happening and that you have found some avenues to get that information to your students. Is there anything
Yeah,
else you want to?
it's a conversation we have at every director's meeting. And I would say unequivocally, all of the program directors have a desire to integrate more community birth. And like you said, hopefully it will continue to be more available. But currently, a lot of us are in the same sort of situation.
Yeah. Yes. And that desire for community birth to be more integrated and more available for all is something that I know all of us on this call um, agree on. And, that is why BCE has started our pledge, our beloved Birth 50 by 50 initiative. If you haven't heard of it, Julie's going to drop in the chat now the website, which is an audacious goal for 50% of babies to be born into the care of midwives by the year 2050. What would that look like, right? That unifying goal. And so this conversation about student midwives is all about one of the pillars, which is growing the midwifery workforce. But when you go to the website, you will see our 6 pillars of paths, if you will, how we plan to get this goal met. Beloved Birth 50 by 50. We encourage everybody to sign the pledge as an organization, as an individual, as a grandma, as a teacher, as a dentist, whatever you are. Find your why and your way that you can contribute to this goal of increasing access to midwifery care for all in all settings. And definitely BCE sees our role in contributing to the community birth infrastructure piece as well. So thank you everyone for sharing your wisdom, stories, and calls to action. What we've heard today is that community birth, whether in homes or birth centers, is not just a setting, it's a philosophy. And it's a model of care that centers dignity, equity, and trust. So to sustain this model, we need to make sure that our training models, support systems, and job opportunities are truly accessible to students across the spectrum, especially those from marginalized communities. So now I just want to stop talking for like a minute and and drink some water and field some questions in the chat. If you have some, we have looks like what 16 minutes or so exactly for questions. So please, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We would love to hear. And since I can't really man the chat as well and look, I'm going to rely on Julie to elevate some questions for us.
Not seeing any questions yet. Going to welcome everyone. Please, if you have a question, or you could raise your hand, we could take you off mute if you want, but please drop your questions in the chat. Here we
I
go.
believe there was one we might have missed up top. From Melve Solomon, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Can you read it, Darian? If you see it, that'd be great.
Sure.
Yeah.
It may be directed to Ruth, I'm not quite sure, but it says, will these programs be accessible for only be accessible for CNMs? Will these programs only be accessible for CNMs?
Okay. Maybe referring to the Netherlands placement you were talking about. Is that what
I
you're
was
talking about?
wondering if it was maybe to Talita and that fellowship.
Yeah.
So maybe
Our program is currently, although that is a dream of Lisa Kane-Lose, that eventually we'll have also a collaboration with the CPM program. But for right now, it's CNM only.
And Talita?
Yeah, if it's talking about a fellowship program like ours, to choices, a midwife is a midwife is a midwife. I don't personally get like caught up into like CNM versus CPM. And I will say that for our program, because we're so comprehensive and there are some restrictions on what CPMs can do. That's partly why this is open to CNMs only, the fellowship.
Yeah. We have another question. We can come back to that. There's more questions on that. Here's a question. Hello, I'm not sure if this was discussed. I was wondering how to go about finding preceptors as a student midwife. I will be starting school in January and searching for a preceptor currently.
How
Hi,
exciting.
Sabrina.
Yeah, I was gonna, Darian, can you speak to that a little bit? Finding
Sure. When I first started sharing, I just mentioned about encouraging all students to get involved. If there is a birth center local, there is a lot of expansion and growth for birth centers. So if there's one local to you, please, try to get involved one way, shape, or another, whether it's attending a training event or just an event in general for families, just going into the space, introducing yourself, just, maybe even asking to shadow a volunteer. Again, that's what I did when I um, found Birth Detroit. I walked into an event and just introduced myself as like, oh, I'm starting midwifery school. May I shadow you one day? Introducing myself to all the midwives and just, being open and connecting and networking with, the people aspire to, practice like and things like that.
Thank
Whether
you.
it's local or maybe a couple of miles out. I was used to think that I had to travel to, find a preceptor, and it was very, discouraging a little bit, but, again, keep networking, keep connecting with, birth workers in your community and building your reputation.
Exactly. I would say the same. Put yourself out there, Google stalk everyone, try and get to whoever you can get to that is practicing birth work in whatever capacity, and just become a part of your local community that is doing birth work, as we call this larger umbrella term. Um, Sara, there's a question specifically asked from you, and I also want to know if you can ask the one about malpractice insurance in a freestanding center as well, if you might be able to speak
Yeah.
into this. Um, Julie, were you going to say something different?
I was just going to say I was going to read a couple of them and then folks could. So the one to Sada was, what steps would you recommend for students to work towards accomplishship in our current role? We also have a question about the need for malpractice insurance. Can you talk about that, in a freestanding birth center? And then advice for people who live in a place with no community birth center.
Just all those questions, Sara, just your wisdom.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
We can spread those around.
It's a range. I'll go ahead and answer the question directed towards me. Thank you for the question. I always ask myself, including right now on this panel, who's missing at the table? That's what I always ask myself. And that's how, for me, you can be an actual accomplice by taking that question and turning it into action. Because if I think about who is missing at this table, I don't know right now because I don't know exactly all the details of everyone on this Zoom, but I'm going to just offer a concrete example. This is not a criticism. This is just a concrete example. I don't know how accessible this Zoom is for people who may have various disabilities. I don't see an ASL interpreter. We're not using closed caption. Maybe that wasn't a request. I know there were asks of whether or not somebody had access needs. But that is a practice in my mind to ask myself, is this accessible to everyone? Who's not at the table? Are people with various access needs in this space? So as a student, when you're in a birth center setting, you're interviewing potential midwives to precept with you, you're interviewing at a school, ask yourself, who's not at this table? Are there Black and brown people at the table with you? Are there transgender, nonconforming, queer people at the table? Are there people of various ages? Are there people with various language offerings to bring? And I don't mean is English not their first language, but how many languages do they speak? Are there people who have different experiences with their views around where they want to give birth, home birth, birth center, hospital birth? And when you ask yourself who's missing at the table, then you can go about finding ways to bring those people to the table. And if you realize you were the one missing at the table, stand in your power of being who you are. And if the people who are in power, like the midwife you're interviewing with or the birth center you're interviewing with, if they take offense to your questions about wondering how to make the practice more expansive, or have they ever had a trans or queer person on their staff, for example, that is a red flag if somebody is offended by your question of inclusivity. And I would encourage you to not back down and be in your power of actually asking people to make being an accomplice a verb.
Thank you. That's awesome. More actionable steps. Awesome. Can anyone, maybe Talita, speak to the malpractice coverage piece in a freestanding birth center setting? Are you aware of any of that Choices navigates?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a lot to say on it, except that we have it. And it's a good idea.
Okay. Yes. Great. Awesome. Sara or Darian, not to highlight either of you, but does either of you have anything to offer there, Darian?
Honestly, I might have missed the question. If that could be repeated, that would be very helpful. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Just a question about malpractice insurance coverage in the out-of-hospital setting, which frankly, as a student, I didn't know. If you have that answer already, I'm like, you are, yes, girl, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
I don't have the full answer to that. I would say to ask the midwives that, maybe do have malpractice insurance or who are practicing, in that manner with feedback that, you can get from them. But I don't, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't.
Here's
When it
another
comes
thing I can add. It was required for me to have malpractice insurance as a student midwife, and that was something that I had to pay for on my own. And the other thing that just came to my head was in terms of malpractice providers, is that sometimes they have restrictions on whether or not VBAC is accepted. So that's actually a big thing that's been a topic for us in the last year in terms of malpractice carriers. So that's something that I'd put on my radar if I were you thinking about practicing and getting malpractice insurance.
And that's why I feel like it's definitely important to get that, well-rounded education. For me, nurse midwives and, the birth center may not be practicing and, for offering VBAC services. But again, that's why I network and connect with my other preceptors who do offer that, just so again, I can, learn and train in both. So it's just, trying to find opportunity and space, to grow as much as possible.
One question that's come in a few times is folks talking about their interest in starting a birth center and what advice folks might have.
Sorry, I'm on mute because I'm trying to be in the chat and in face, and that's not working. But if anyone else wants to chime in, I was just going to say that Kinfolk Consulting has birth center consulting and kind of does packages and classes around this. Kinfolk Consulting is owned by Rebecca Polston and Tamara Tate, which are two Black midwife leaders within the network. And then the American Association of Birth Centers also has, which is the national larger organization for birth centers, has this So You Want to Start a Birth Center workshop. So I was just going to drop the link to Kinfolk in the chat here and put that AABC information. But Sara, do you have anything else to offer there?
Yeah, thank you so much for these formal recommendations, because I don't have a formal statement to make about a website to go to. And I think that's actually what I want to say, which is that I'm so grateful that this space exists now. But we didn't have this, y'all, back in the day. Like, we were out here just having potlucks and gathering in a park, talking about who's interested in community birth. And I don't want to get away from that, because especially during these times of very intense government scrutiny and politics that we have to navigate, I just would really encourage you to not outsource your power. And remember that if you are in a community and you believe that a birth center should be in your community, be in your community with your people. Talk to the people around you. Talk to the people who are having babies. Talk to somebody at the grocery store. Go ahead and have a community event in the park near your home. You don't have to have a whole formalized business plan just to begin to build the foundations of your birth center, because I promise you that it's the community that is going to sustain your birth center. So follow your heart if you really have that passion by starting where you are locally. And I honestly am grateful for the roots of Oakland that taught me, we were just renting random buildings. We were always just doing our best. I'm really glad that Birth Center Equity exists now so that people can actually have formalized support, thank goodness, because the truth is our birth center's closed, right? We're not still able to sustain them, although we're going to get another one because of the support of Birth Center Equity and the vision of leadership here in the Bay Area. But those leaders have been in the community out just having a little sign that says, welcome to the potluck at the park. And I just encourage you to keep those grassroots foundations in your vision for a birth center.
Thank you for that, Sara. Thank you for that. That just felt like medicine right there. So yes, thank you for that reminder that when you're rooted in community, that is what you need. You know, we got. What are all the things that we say, right? And it is so true and time again displayed by the birth centers within our network, definitely, and probably outside of it as well. So thank you for that. Um, okay, so we are about at time. And so I want to thank our incredible panelists, Darian, Sara, Ruth, and Talita, for your transparency, dedication, and vision. And thank you all for showing up today to learn, ask, and be a part of a movement that keeps community birth and the midwifery model alive and thriving. Please go to belovedbirth50by50.org and sign the pledge and share it with everyone that will listen to you. And stay connected so we can keep this conversation going beyond this session. All right, everyone, take good care. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.